Hi everyone, my name is Lotte Betts-Dean. I'm an Australian vocalist. So I want to share with you a couple of extended vocal techniques that are sometimes used in contemporary music. How to perform them safely, how to have fun with your voice, how to try out some new tricks and train your ear in the process. I'm thrilled to be presenting this episode of Joining the Dots. So I've been based in London for almost 6 years, but I come back to Australia as often as I can. My most recent project with Dots+Loops was last year for Conviction, and have some really fond memories of that project. About myself as a singer, I like lots of different things. I love singing all different styles, music from all different times, kinds. Very interested in early music, opera, chamber music, art song recital, and of course contemporary music as well as a huge part of my life. The first project I did with Dots+Loops was a contemporary music project where we performed music of David Little, the American composer, and that was a lot of fun and almost sort of non-classical at all in style. One piece in particular had me sort of singing with an almost rock voice. So I really enjoy music that challenges my voice and has me doing unusual things. And yeah, I just find that really fun. So it is important to start with a warmed up voice, especially if we're going to be trying out some extended vocal techniques in a little bit. One of my favorite ways of warming up the voice is a very, very simple method. It's used by singing teachers and singers all over the world. It's really simple. All you have to do is sing through a straw. Yep, a straw. So go and get yourself a straw, get a paper one, not a plastic one. Let's save the environment. And then let's get going. It's important to remember that the vocal folds are a set of minuscule muscles in here, and they need to be protected and be helped to perform in the most efficient way possible because they have a huge job to do. And singing through a straw is one of the best ways to relax the vocal folds and get them functioning in the best way. The ways in which singing through a straw is really beneficial for the voice is that it equalizes the airflow from the lungs through the vocal folds and out the mouth. So the aperture is significantly reduced by singing through a straw than if we were singing with an open mouth. And this occlusion, this blockage basically, creates air pressure and it builds in the oral cavity, in the mouth basically. And this air pressure then also builds just above the vocal folds, which helps to push back on the air pressure coming from the lungs. And that's really helpful for the vocal folds because it basically relieves them of their job of resisting all of the lung pressure on their own. And it helps the vocal folds to function better and gain strength. Singing, like all music, is essentially acoustic energy that we are creating with our lungs coming through tiny muscles. By singing through a straw, you are trapping that acoustic energy and harnessing it. So you're forcing the tiny air particles in the vocal tract to vibrate a lot more because there's limited space, which in turn helps the vocal folds with their self-oscillation movement, which creates the voice, which creates singing. One of the things that can damage a voice as well is collision of the vocal folds. So your vocal folds open and close a little bit too hard or too fast. And when you're singing through a straw, that is reduced. So of course we can't stop collision of vocal folds really because that's what creates sound waves, but it's a really, really useful way of rehabilitating and strengthening the voice. So this is where the increase in air pressure comes in, created by the straw, because as the pressure builds, it goes into the vocal folds and in between them, which creates this kind of amazing air cushioning effect, where the vocal folds actually themselves barely contact each other, but they're still able to create sound. You know that the vocal folds themselves are really supported by singing through the straw, so it's a quiet sound, but it's a very restorative one. You can also use this exercise to play with your range and see how high you can sing. So I'm going to just start with some sirens, really, really smooth from the bottom of my range up to the top. And you'll probably hear a little break when you try this, going from chest to head voice. That's absolutely fine. That's completely normal. Just let the voice do what it wants to do, and remember to stay relaxed in the face and to maintain nice support from your lower abdominals while you do this exercise. You can also try playing with different sirens as well, playing with just the top part of the voice. So after doing some sirens, you can try out a few other exercises like doing intervals. So I'm going to do a set of perfect fourths, just moving up slowly. And this exercise is really useful for ironing out breaks in the voice, also known as passagios. You can then start playing with taking the straw away and singing, but first using the straw, so alternating between straw singing and actual singing, like this. And I find E is a really nice vowel to use because it's really nice and calm and keeps the voice in an equal position. And you'll notice when you take the straw away and then sing normally that it feels perhaps a bit easier to sing, that the voice feels a bit more supported already. Or that you're singing naturally, wanting to sing a bit quieter and more gently, which is ideal really. It means that your voice is working more efficiently. So let's jump into it with some extended vocal techniques. So the first one isn't necessarily an extended vocal technique necessarily, but it is a technique that I've come across quite a lot in performing new music, and it's really, really useful thing to be able to do, not only vocally, but also for your oral training, and that is the use of microtones or quarter notes, or quarter tones, sorry. So that is the space between the semitones. They're not notes that exist on a piano, and there are lots of artists using microtonality and a lot of composers as well, so it's a useful thing to be able to do. So I'm just going to start on an E and sing a chromatic sequence up, and then take it back down to the E and do a really slow slide up, basically, trying to find the spaces between the semitones. And then sliding between the semitones. Even just in doing that, you can hear that there is actually a lot more space in a semitone. So let's break it down to just one semitone and see if we can get to the quarter tone in between the semitone first. I'm going to start on an E again. So sliding between the pitches can be really useful actually. If you just slowly slide from the E up one semitone, you can hear all the different gradients of pitches between that space. If you have a piano or you are a pianist and you want to play around with singing microtones, I would also definitely recommend singing along with yourself, playing a chromatic scale on the piano and then trying to sing against that. So playing a minor second on the piano, but singing a quarter tone, testing out your ear and your voice to defy what you're hearing from the piano. So I don't have a piano personally, sadly. I'm not a pianist, but I do have an iPad with a piano app on it, of course. So just to give an example of what I just mentioned, I will sing along a semitone with the piano app and then switch to continue playing the semitone down, but sing a quarter tone instead. It will sound unpleasant, but it's all about that. It's all about finding the spaces between. It might sound ugly, but it creates a really interesting texture. And now the quarter tone. Exercising that will just train your ear, and then if a microtonal thing comes up in a score, you'll know how to attempt it. The next technique we're going to try out is overtone singing, and essentially that means creating more than one pitch when you sing. It's also known as multiphonics. So I first came across overtone singing or multiphonic singing when I was in children's choir and we were singing some folk song from Bulgaria. Overtone singing is something that's used in folk music in a lot of countries, and there are some specialists of overtone singing I really highly recommend checking out online. What they can do is absolutely unbelievable. It's literally like having two voices inside you. But we're just going to have a play around with it now and see what we can create. So I would recommend starting in chest voice. That's where you're going to get the special kind of resonators required to create overtones, and the E vowel is definitely the best vowel to try and find that as well. Although as you become more confident looking for overtones in your singing, you can start changing vowels around as well. But I found the E vowel kind of gets you the best results, definitely. So we're going to just sing an E vowel on a comfortable pitch in your chest voice. E. So you can't really hear any multiphonics or overtones there yet, but if you slowly move your tongue inside your mouth a little bit further back and play around with where your tongue position is in your mouth, you might start to hear overtones appearing that essentially can move on in their own kind of space above the tone that you're actually singing. E. So if you heard some overtones there, I was playing around with maintaining an E vowel essentially, but playing around with the shape of my mouth, the aperture, but keeping the same internal vowel shape of E all the time. Keeping in mind that you can play with the position of your tongue. So if I'm just singing E, the tongue is pretty forward and the back of the tongue is quite up, but if I start playing around with it and looking for overtones or multiphonics, you can move the tongue back and forward in the mouth to try and achieve that as well. So let's have a go. So during that, I'm actually moving my tongue, kind of keeping it always touching the sides of my molars, but moving it slightly back and forward, and then also changing the shape of my mouth as well, which is creating different tones. So it's a very hard nasal tone that you want, but you also don't want to push too hard on the voice. It all goes back to what I was talking about with the straw. You don't want to create too much collision between the vocal folds, but an amazingly small amount of air pressure is actually required to create that hard nasal sound. It's all about maintaining breath control and breath stability in your core and in your abdominals. It always comes back to that essentially. So have a try. Start on an E vowel, sing along with me, and see if you can hear some overtones appearing when you move your tongue and change the aperture of your mouth. So when I sing there, the overtones that are appearing to my ear kind of sound at a pitch of like ya ba 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 ba, except several octaves higher, obviously. I'm also by no means an expert in overtone singing. There are some absolute specialists out there that you can have a listen to online. They're basically singing with two voices, which is absolutely amazing to see. But it's amazing what you can try and find, what sounds you can try and find, and the overtones that come through, even by just giving it a go for a little bit. If you feel like you're starting to create some overtones or multiphonics, but you're struggling to hear them, a good way of amplifying that for yourself is by singing directly at a mirror or at a window as well works. It just amplifies it because it's sort of right there, and it sends the frequencies straight back to your ear. So let's see if that works for me. The last technique that we're going to look at really quickly is Sprechgesang. It's a German word. Essentially it means speech singing. And this is a really unusual and interesting technique that appears most famously in Schoenberg's piece Pierrot Lunaire. It's about 45 minutes long. The entire piece uses this technique. It is neither speech nor singing, so it's something in between. It's a really useful thing to try out, I find, not only because it does appear in some repertoire from around that time. It's a really interesting vocal exercise, a brain exercise more than anything, to try and find something that is really halfway between speech and narration. I have performed Pierrot Lunaire a couple of times now, and the way that I approached learning how to do Sprechgesang was to start by learning the notes themselves. More often than not, the phrase will be written out with pitches, and then there'll be sort of perhaps a dash through the dot to indicate that it's not actually meant to be a sung note. This does appear all the time in contemporary music, dashes through notes that indicate that it's not meant to be specifically sung on that pitch and needs to have the quality of something halfway between speech and singing. However, you need to maintain the essence of the pitch, which is where it gets a little bit complicated. So I would recommend learning the phrase first, as if it were a sung phrase, singing it, and then basically going through a process of bit by bit forgetting it, so that only the memory of the shape of the phrase remains and the speaking voice is allowed to come through that shape. The first song is called Mondestrunken, and if we were to sing the phrase as it is written, it would sound like this. Den Wein, den man mit Augen trinkt. But in order to use Sprechgesang on this, we would maintain the shape of the phrase but lose the pitches. Den Wein, den man mit Augen trinkt. So you can hear that the shape of the phrase has kind of been maintained. Perhaps even there's a little bit too much singing voice in that colour. It's definitely a process. Sprechgesang is not something that just comes to you, and even though I've performed this piece several times now, I still feel like I'm figuring it out how exactly to find that sound. Schoenberg specifically really didn't want any sort of singing voice in it, and perhaps as performers on stage we are conscious of sounding ugly, and naturally even when we're trying not to sing, naturally try and find a sound that is perhaps more pleasant to the ear. But that's what makes this piece so exciting as well, and a really fun one to play with, because you're constantly forcing your ear to move away from what you are expecting yourself to sound like, and perhaps also what the audience is expecting to come out of your mouth. Why not try doing Sprechgesang with one of your favorite songs? You could pick any famous tune and sing it as if normally singing, and then try and take the pitches away and maintain the shape of the phrase, but incorporating more of your natural speaking voice.
Without a sound, and sprinkle upon your auburn tresses the pallid blooms of moonlight.
So there we have it, guys, a little walk through some of my favorite extended vocal techniques that I've come across while performing new music. If you have any questions or concerns about any of the techniques that I've discussed on this video, then don't hesitate to get in touch. My website is lottebetts-Dean.com, and you can also reach me on social media at Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook as well. If any of the exercises hurt or feel uncomfortable at any point, then definitely stop doing that exercise. It might not be right for you, or we can also look into finding ways that that technique might be easier for you to do. So definitely do get in touch if that's the case. Stay safe is the most important thing. You only get one set of vocal folds, so you have to look after them. Don't forget to warm down as well as warming up with your straw. I highly, highly recommend that. And have fun with your voice. Thank you so much for joining me on Dots and Loops, Joining the Dots. See you later.